Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, the podcast where mothers share their powerful stories of healing and empowerment. I am your host, Amanda Quick, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and advocate. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of mothers who have overcome adversity, found their fierce feminine power, and embraced transformative parenting. Whether you're a mother driven to fight for your children or someone with a story burning inside you, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll explore themes of resilience, self-trust, and healing from our traumatic experiences, all spotlighting the profound journeys of awakened mothers. Join us for a space of naked authenticity, deep inspiration, and genuine connection. Embrace the divine feminine and discover your own warrior mama within. Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change. Welcome, everyone, and back to another episode of Awakened Motherhood. I'm your host, Amanda Quick, and today I am very excited to introduce Meredith. Meredith is a coach and host of the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, which translates quantum science into meaningful action to improve our health and our lives. Meredith supports cutting-edge practitioners and business owners to succeed on their own terms in the real world. She has 3 children and has lived on 3 different continents. Wow. Welcome, Meredith.
Thanks, Amanda. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's just a whole lot in that just little bit. And, I know as we talked previously, so much of what you're doing now is come through, the learnings you had in your own journey. And so I would love for you to kind of start from the beginning and share what kicked off this for you and when did this all begin?
So this particular chapter, the Quantum Biology Collective podcast chapter, was kicked off due to my own personal health issues around the birth of my 3rd child, and involved my inability to figure out why I was so freaking exhausted all the time, no matter how much sleep I got. And I was in that situation that I know a lot of people who have chronic health symptoms are in, where you're not really sick enough to get the attention of any medical people, but the quality of your life is really suffering. And I was in that space that, I went to my doctor and all the things, and they ran my labs, and they're like, everything's fine. You're just tired. And I'm like, it's not. I'm not just tired.
You're a mother of 3 kids. You're just tired.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing was, because this happened with my 3rd child, and I had my first 2 children about 2.5 years apart, and then my 3rd child was born when my older children were 5 and 8 years old. So there was a bit of a space, and I knew what it felt like to be tired from sleep deprivation. Those years of the baby toddler years or the toddler preschool years. You guys know.
Yes. Anybody as a mom,
yeah,
we know.
You're tired. But the difference was with that kind of tiredness, with that kind of fatigue, when I finally would get help or catch up on my sleep, I would feel better.
Right.
This new kind of tired was no, I couldn't, I would sleep 10 hours and wake up feeling tired. I couldn't shake it. And none of the things that were supposed to help would help. Everyone's like, oh, if you're, exercise gives you energy. So I would exercise, and then I would couldn't walk up a flight of stairs for 3 days because it would drain my battery instead of recharging my battery. So, I don't like to accept things that aren't working for me. I'm
Kindred
not
spirit here.
Just keep going with it,
right? I'm not gonna accept that this is my new reality.
Exactly. And I'd gone through other things leading up to that. I had given up alcohol. I'd gone through some serious, spiritual awakenings and done a lot of hard inner work. And I was like, I'm just gonna apply those principles to this. This can't be the end of the road. So it kickstarted, I did food and supplements, and I saw all kinds of wonderful practitioners who helped me with all of the things. But it still wasn't budging. And then I discovered that there was a huge amount of research that was getting zero attention from anybody on the impact of light on our bodies, on our biology, and specifically on our mitochondria, and how dysfunctional mitochondria, the first symptom that you get when your mitochondria aren't working optimally is fatigue. So I went
It's a
down
light
that
bulb.
rabbit hole. Yeah, it was like, oh my God. And I learned that I was doing things that were absolutely destroying my body's ability to create energy, such as
Interesting.
reading on my iPad before bed, having bright LED lights on, not going outside during the day, especially in the morning. And it also explained why sometimes it would get better and sometimes it would get worse. And I couldn't tell why. And then once I started to put these pieces together, it's like, oh, it got worse after I downloaded that app where you could read every book in the world on your iPad because I switched. I switched from paper books to screens and spent a lot of time reading, right? Like I started to piece together all of these things. So then I made huge changes, but then I was kind of like, why don't more people know this? It's really simple. It's really straightforward. The science is all there. So I started interviewing people, everyone I could find, just like combing the internet, interviewing people who were able to speak to this, who'd done some research on it. And now it's the podcast.
Wow. Wow. So can you tell us a little bit more, about like what are those nuanced changes that you needed to make that really changed everything?
Yes. So I think the easiest way to understand it is that we need to think about light the same way we think about food, which is there's healthy food, there's real food, and then there's processed food / junk food.
Right.
And anybody who's at all interested in taking care of themselves has some understanding of that. And so people have different levels of understanding, but we all know that like eating a candy bar is not the same thing as eating, chicken in a salad, right? Like those are different. So, but we don't apply that same logic to light, and it applies. So
Interesting.
natural light is from the sun, and that's the sun, the frequencies coming out of the sun from the moment it rises, or even before it rises, like when it starts to get light outside until it goes down. Those frequencies, those light frequencies carry information that our body is decoding all of the time. And that information is telling our bodies, okay, now it's time to do the waking up things. Release this hormone, make this, do that. Now it's time to digest. Now it's time to go to the bathroom. Now it's all of these things. And then when the light disappears and it becomes dark, then our body is triggered to sleep and do all the rest and restorative functions that are supposed to happen while we're sleeping. And so if we don't go outside and get that natural light, our body doesn't get the correct information to function optimally. Just in the same way that, if we eat Doritos, we're not giving our body the same nutrients as if we ate real food. It's the same thing with light. And by the same token, if we expose ourselves to artificial light, especially after sunset, we're taking away those dark signals. We're telling our body it's daytime, and we're completely like throwing the very exquisitely and finely tuned mechanisms of our body into chaos, just by basically eating junk light at night.
It's like the dinner, the sugar high that we get at 8:00, except it's light based, essentially.
Exactly. Yes. And the light bulbs that most of us use, it's almost, I had a scientist on who has done a lot of research on the connection between circadian disruption and breast cancer and prostate cancer. And he was talking about these light bulbs, and he explained how they were made and how they were made to give off the most energy possible using the least amount of energy and give off the most amount of energy. And the way he described it, I was like, it sounds like someone was making a food that was like, how could we take as much nutrients out as possible and
Yes.
maximize the amount of calories and
Yes.
sugar.
Well,
That's
which is what they do.
equivalent. That yes, and
Which
they
is
did it
actually
with the
so much
lights
of
too.
the GMO created food, right? It's how
Yeah.
do we process this, mass produce it with the least amount of effort, with the most amount of output. Never mind the nutrient value. That's irrelevant.
Yes, exactly. And that is our light bulbs as well, right? And then there's all these
Fascinating.
connections, right? Like if you eat real food and you eat, say like fish or high quality protein and you go outside, like your body is going to respond differently to those light signals when it has real food inputs.
Right.
So yeah, it all works together.
Really fascinating, and it's like, it seems so obvious when you say it.
I know.
It really does. Like,
You read this research and you're like, oh my God, yeah. Why did
well, and I think like
what?
even my house plants, like if they're not happy, I need to give them more light. Like that's we think that. We don't
Yeah.
think about our bodies this way.
Exactly. No, that's totally it, Amanda. It's like if we bought a plant and put it in front of our laptop in the closet all day, we wouldn't be
die.
surprised that it doesn't thrive.
No. And we wouldn't be like, oh, we should give it more fertilizer. That's like
Exactly.
maybe, but that doesn't, there's like
you
missing...
are totally intuiting all of this. Yes, exactly. And that's what we do. We're like, I'm not feeling well. I better micromanage my food just a little bit more. Maybe if I just take out a little more sugar, take a little, and obviously our food
it's
is
the
important.
bugs. I got to take the bugs off. I got to give it more poison. I got to whatever, medication. Like it's very silly, but we totally do this.
Yes.
So what happened? Like, obviously you got better, but it sounds like you changed the light bulbs in your house. You started going outside and things changed.
Yes. I mean, it took a while, and I finally found an integrative physician who understood all this and was supportive of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while to fully get to a place where I feel I have normal energy. That being said, I felt the beneficial effects quite quickly. Now it does make a difference. Like I really started to get into this like in the middle of February when we lived in Illinois, and that was a tougher haul than, if it had been a time of year where you can go outside more.
Mm-hmm.
But you can reestablish your circadian rhythm within a few days. Right. So depending what's going on for you, I can't say like how quickly or not a person will feel better, but just having that foundation established can happen quite quickly. Most people notice an improvement in their sleep almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
The quality of their sleep, they either fall asleep more easily, they stay asleep. Because that's the other thing is that people are like, oh, well, I sleep, but it's, there's a lot that's supposed to happen while we're asleep. That's when our body restores itself. That's when our cells repair themselves, throw out the stuff that the cells that are too broken to be repaired. There's a whole symphony of activity that happens while we're sleeping. And if we expose ourselves to bright artificial light at night, the hormones that trigger that activity are suppressed, which is, and so our sleep is not as restorative. So we might be not awake, but that feeling, and I hear this a lot from people when they first get rid of the artificial light at night, they're like, it's so much easier to wake up in the morning. I don't have that really groggy, like, oh God, do I have to get to bed? Like that gets less and less. And then if you go outside as soon as you do wake up, that really helps as well. You're setting yourself up to have a good night's sleep first thing in the morning by going outside.
Interesting. Well, and I find for me, depending on, if I follow the sun more just as I have to get up early because the kids have to get to school, which means I'm getting up with the sun, that I am more tired as the sun goes down in a different way because I've set myself up versus if I'm staying up all night watching TV or whatever, then I wake up like, ugh.
Yeah.
Right. And you can blame it. And like the logical brain goes, oh, I just stayed up too late or I, whatever. But it is interesting if we really look at it from a biological perspective. We also didn't get the sleep we needed during that period of time because we weren't exposing ourselves to, right, the melatonin release and all of the hormones didn't actually get to do their job to put us in the right state and place.
Yes,
Which
exactly.
fascinating.
Exactly.
So I'm curious how this evolved into talking about quantum biology, because I imagine it's expanded beyond this whole light conversation, right? And there's a whole lot more to our biology than receiving light and food, right? There's a lot that goes on in the way that we restore ourselves. And so I'm curious, what other, components of our biology, are you working with now?
So that's a really good question because there are circadian biology and quantum biology are not the same thing.
Right.
So circadian biology is much more well established. The research on circadian biology really got started in the 80s. They made some discoveries that scientist I was referring to, Dr. Martin Mortyeed, he decided to study circadian rhythms in the 1980s, and his mentors all said, "Oh, why would you study that? It doesn't really matter. It's not a big a deal. It doesn't matter. It doesn't." And he's like, "No, I feel like there's something there." And now you go into PubMed, which is the database of published research, and there are like 85,000 published studies on the bad effects of dysregulated circadian rhythm. And there's more and more all the time. Quantum biology is like sort of takes it a step, takes it deeper.
Okay.
So circadian biology can look at the biochemical responses that our body has to light. But at a certain point, it's like they don't have, they're like, well, but then at that point, we can't really explain anymore. And that's where it's gotten picked up by the quantum biologists, which is the intersection of physics and biology, which is a very new field and is not as well established. So there are there's some academic work being done in that field, but it hasn't fully trickled out except for the brilliant people that I found on the internet. And we also have a foundation that trains practitioners in this, what we call applied quantum biology, which is like the practical application of this science. And that is looking at how the body works sort of on the subatomic level, which is not what traditional biology or biochemistry does. That is a new field. And once you get into that, light is just the beginning. That's where you get into the place where everything that probably your audience, had some affinity towards understanding of emotional healing, energetic healing, all of those things now have a scientific explanation.
Well, isn't that validating?
Yeah.
I mean, because, from my perspective, when I think about quantum, I think about outside of time and space. I think about past, present, and future in a different way. I think about the dimensions of our physical body, emotional body, mental body, and spiritual body intersecting, and a way that those all are entangled to each other. And so, that's the healing work in a sense that it's so many spiritual healers and, everybody has gone down this path to understand. And even modern medicine gets that, like, your stress levels impact your physical. Like, they got that far. But they're not able to say your emotional trauma that's stored in your body is impacting your, is what caused your autoimmune condition. They're not quite to that level of accepting, even though the spiritual community is like, well, of course it does. Right. And so what I'm hearing you say is that there is now a science that's actually studying on a biological level how all of these other frequencies beyond light are impacting our cellular DNA level, makeup, in a sense, that those translate into our physical experience.
Yes.
That's super exciting.
Yes, it is. It's hugely validating. It's really amazing.
Wow.
And yeah, all of the things that you just said. So, I mean, of course, there are different people there are people who look at it through a very academic lens, and they're like talking about biophotons, and
sure,
that's that. But there is also a lot of very rich research being done in the area of consciousness, and you mentioned trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that, so the idea is we are, most of the cells in our body have a certain type of water, which is called fourth phase water, structured water, which is like a plasma, almost like a liquid crystal. So we think of the body as being a liquid crystal matrix that is in quantum communication all of the time with itself and with its environment, and who knows what other dimensions.
And a whole lot more, right?
And a whole lot more.
And we know, in a sense, I don't know if science knows, but intuitives know that water holds memory and data and information, and I know the crystals do it too. And I think, I don't remember where I read, but somewhere I read that like the makeup of quartz is basically water in a lot of ways, and so it's just a different composition of the way we store that data in our bodies and read it and alchemize it and all the things. And so if we're able to say, and it actually reminds me, I'm totally on a side note, but I had a friend of mine who was sending me this woman who's doing studies about actually freezing water with certain intentions, and the water makeup would change. And so it was
Beta
like proving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was kind of like, but we're made up of water. And so what we're holding in our bodies is shifting and changing and reacting, as well as the things we're not acknowledging that aren't able to shift and change, right? And so all of these pieces actually proving on a biological level opens up not only like validating what we've already known to be true, but almost like new possibilities for like, how do we shift and change it? Because like, for instance, my son is type 1 diabetic, but I already knew that this was a reaction and response from a lot of the trauma that he underwent. Right. And so like, I have that awareness. He's not fully ready to process everything he's walked through because he's right. And that's not appropriate yet. And yet we're working on pieces and understanding, and he's learning a whole hell of a lot about how blood sugar impacts, emotions. And like, he can tell when I feel bad that I need to go check my blood sugar because I just screamed at everybody. Like, he's got a whole lot of understanding for 12-year-olds about how the emotional processing and how he's picking up things in his environment. And like, all of that's fantastic. But it's almost like if we start to actually look at what created those autoimmune responses, because the environment that his pancreas is in is what is the problem, not the pancreas itself. Right. But we're not able to release those things because we don't yet understand those environments on a like subatomic level, really. Right. Because everything else looks fine. Right. His blood composition looks fine, the physical level or whatever. And so it's like thinking about how we can start to dissect these things, because what I have noticed, and I'm sure you have too through interviews, is there are a lot of patterns in the ways these illnesses manifest based on specific emotions or traumas endured. Like, there's a lot of, not necessarily one for one, but especially how a person's experience. I can tell you how many people have told me after a high conflict abusive separation, their kids developed type 1 diabetes. Like,
wow.
I have seen this pattern repeatedly. Like, it's found me. People just have said this has occurred. And it's just this fascinating, like, okay, there is clearly a deep connection. And generally it was abuse from the father as well. And both male and female children. So there's like all of these components that we still don't understand about on a biological level, how mother and father wounds and how all these things play out, right? And so it's almost like my brain immediately goes, what's happening, to the water makeup and the cellular level, and even underneath all of that. And because time isn't real, and at one point they were healthy, and in the future, if they have, like, how do we bridge that and sort of like remove this unhealthy layer so the body can naturally heal itself because it wants to, right? And so it's like seeing that on a science level just makes me super excited to like, what is next? How do we dig deeper? It's just fascinating. I don't really have a question on that. I'm just like,
no, that's so interesting about the diabetes. Yeah, as a trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what's coming to my mind is there's some really interesting research being done on mitochondria, right? And that's become a bit of a buzzword in the health space. Although, the mainstream medicine still doesn't really know how to take care of mitochondria. But yes, like the relationship is so intricate and so exquisite. And what I'm learning is that, like, the great good news is if we learn how to take care of our mitochondria, even from the perspective of our physical environment and the food that we eat and the light and all that kind of thing, that can actually give us more energy for emotional healing.
Because it's all connected. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of times we just
So,
like, I
yeah.
can't deal with that. I can't feel that. It's actually, I don't have the energy.
Yes.
Interesting.
So, and the mitochondria, so the history of the mitochondria are that when they first existed, however many tens of thousands of years ago, they existed as an organism outside of the body. So they have environmental sensors, and then there were, they got absorbed into what became humans, however you want to, whatever your view is on that. But so we are filled with mitochondria. But mitochondria originally existed to be able to be in the environment without being inside of us. So they have environmental sensors.
So there's still
an
entanglement even from where they were in the past.
Absolutely. So when we send them safety signals and take care of them, even if that's the safety signal of being in tune with the light cycles and darkness cycles, of grounding, being outside in nature, having bare feet or our hands or sitting on the ground, all of those safety signals to our body also translate into psychological safety signals and emotional safety signals.
Right. Yeah, I talk a lot about in various pieces about the relationship we have on multiple dimensions of safety, right? Our physical safety, emotional safety, mental, like it's all different. It's conversations we have with ourselves. Yes.
And now there's mitochondrial safety.
And now I'm like, I'm right? Because being emotionally safe is very different than being physically safe. But like, what are you talking about? I'm safe. I'm like, yeah, but you don't feel safe to ever express anger because of, the way your dad has expressed anger or whatever. And, it's a different unpacking versus the stories you're telling about and we beat yourself and gaslight yourself. Like there's a different conversation than whether or not you feel physically safe, right? So there's so many dimensions of safety already. And if we think about how that translates on a biological level to the human, but also what I really love is that the human itself, like we're a universe in our body, right? And like the mitochondria is like another collective working together within us that also needs to feel safe, and that they need to feel safe based on their origins of understanding, and that the environment and the chaos that you've put it through, right? Because you're taking it outside of its natural ability to heal and ground to itself and be connected and all the things that every single organism in the universe needs, both inside body and outside of body, right? And so if we think about how do we not only support the consciousness within us, but the ecosystem and environment as well, and the entanglement of all of that, like it just built this really fascinating map in my brain that I'm very excited.
I can see it unfolding. I love it.
Because the other big piece beyond safety is how from my perspective, when we think about the relationships, which is our environment, right? Our connections to our mom and our dad and our parents and our partners and our children, those like primary relationships inform what levels of safety and different big triggers within ourselves, which is like our external environment, but how that actually reflects to the internal one, right? On all of these other levels. And I feel like there's almost a pattern mapping happens in a sense with all of these pieces. And so it's just this like almost new dimension that is being added to the understanding this, what we would call physical, but that is much deeper than, the like literal meat that we are in a sense.
Yeah. Exactly. No, that's exactly it, Amanda. It's like we're talking about our physical environment, but we're really talking about living in a way that gives us cellular safety.
Yeah. 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 I like that. Cellular
Right.
safety. I like
Yeah.
this because, right, when we think physical, we're like, what can I touch? What can I, do I have a house? Do I have, it's a different conversation than down to and that's where like, even on a DME level, like what other ancestral components have we passed down that is still embedded through all of this generational pieces? Because again, time's not real here. And like how all of that is impacting our biological environment inside our bodies. It's very, very fascinating thinking about actually mapping it out like in science.
Yes.
I love it.
It's super cool. And then you think about, like sound healing or tapping or any of these modalities. They are, putting frequency into this water that's holding the memory to
Right.
dissolve that traumatic memory that's being stored in the water. However, if we go and do a sound healing session and it's like la 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 la, but then we come home and put our bodies back into an environment where our cells are constantly being freaked out and assaulted with frequencies that don't make any sense to it, we probably will shift back.
Well, it's the same as like I'm taking medication and I feel better, and then I stop taking the medication and I don't feel better.
Yeah.
It's the kind of the same thing. We're treating the symptom by, we're taking ourselves out of an environment for a minute. We feel better. Okay, we're adding something, but we're never actually dealing with what's actually going on under the surface. Like we know that's not helpful. There is, I've seen so much about frequency and sound and light and how that in a lot of ways is actually a lot of the future of some of this healing. But what I hear you saying is that's all great and it absolutely can help and work and it's all the same pieces. But if we are unwilling to change our patterns and our regular environment and how we move through like the world, nothing changes, which is deeply tied to so much of the, like my story and what I have shared in the world, not talking about it on a biological level, but how I had to change myself in order to change my patterns, to change my environment. And I had to like really believe and operate differently in order to shift the frequency I was holding to, to change everything in a lot of ways. And so it's like validating that as well as saying, yes, we can use light and sound, but unless we're going to walk around with light and sound on 24/7, it's not going to actually do a whole lot. Which is, I think, why people think it doesn't work, right? Because they feel, just like you go for a massage and you feel relaxed, but then you don't. Interesting.
Yeah. If we're bringing our biofield into coherence through the healing modality, but then we live in an environment that throws it back into incoherence.
Right.
So it all works together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the same with what you're saying, right? Like if we, we can have a perfect circadian rhythm, but if we live in that with somebody who doesn't allow us to be our full selves,
right,
that's not going to work either. It has
all the things.
All the
it's
levels.
Every dimension has to be addressed, right? And it's showing up on all of these different layers. Then and it just gets louder. The more we repeat, as we know, and really kind of thinking about it. And so, from your perspective, obviously, like you had to change the way you interacted with your entire environment in order to solve, your physical symptoms, and I imagine a lot more also changed as a result of that, not just, okay, now I work with light differently. Now I don't want, read my iPad until midnight or whatever. Like beyond that, I'm very curious how else that has shifted your life because, you change one thing and the whole thing snowballs.
It sure does. Yes. Well, there's definitely a spiritual aspect to being connected to these light cycles and an awareness of nature as part of who we are, not something that we go to visit when we go on a walk or go on a vacation, right? Like we are nature.
Mhm.
And so much of what is driving so many health issues is that we've cut ourselves off from that understanding by going inside houses and glass windows and keeping the house sealed shut and filling it up with fake light and non-native EMFs and, all of the things. So there's really like a piece to it where, yeah, a connection develops, I think, beyond what's capable just with a psycho-emotional spiritual practice when you bring nature into it. That, yeah, it's I'm going to bring it back to like that feeling of safety, right? It's like there's a sense of belonging that comes from being like, oh, wait, I'm a part of this world. Like I'm supposed to be here. I belong here. The sun rises and sets to feed my body. Like we all evolved in this ecosystem. We evolved under this sunlight. We evolved outside together. And I really developed an awareness of the importance of being in safe places with people, by attending like groups and allowing myself to feel safe there. And this sort of expanded to include to just include the world.
Interesting. I love it. Well, and it's, you really touched on something that I think is really important to highlight, and such a big piece of all of the, as you can tell, I'm a puzzle person. I'm constantly, picking all these understandings that fit into my understanding of the universe and the world and our experiences. And these wounds, these relationship wounds, these safety pieces, they all stem from this like separation concept, whether it's physical separation, emotional separation, right? It's some version of I don't belong. I wasn't cared for. I wasn't close with. I wasn't seen, validated. Like everything stems from this separation wound. Whatever dimension of it has highlighted for you, it boils down to that, where we don't fit in. We're too different. Nobody understands us. Whatever the version of the story is, it's there. And to me, what I hear you saying is that beyond looking at just the people and the ways that society has boxed the people up that we don't fit in with, and we can, okay, that's one piece. And we can get to the point where we go, okay, I'm not supposed to. But when we really root in and allow the mitochondria to reconnect to its original safety roots, that another part of us gets reconnected to the earth in a different way. And so we're seeking out and we're feeling out, and we're no longer separate because we become part of this ecosystem in a way that we maybe never weren't.
Yes. That's beautiful, Amanda. I love what you're seeing in this. I really do.
It's very fun.
Yes. I have nothing to add.
It's like going back to the witchy roots, really, right? When you think about, right, the back in time, it was, all of the seasons. It was so nature focused on, the plants and the herbs and medicines and, using nature to heal and support this ecosystem that so much has been lost. And, talk about all the reasons of that, but the, kind of going back to those roots, but also then integrating them within our modern society, as we're not necessarily going to go live out in the wood by ourselves, because what we actually still want is the community that understands that we can actually like build upon in ways, which is amazing.
Yes. Yeah, and it's fun.
I mean, clearly I'm one of you, because I'm like, oh, look at this. which is
Yeah, no, you really are. It's funny. There's people who are like, oh, okay, yeah, I should fix my light. Okay, thanks. And then there are people who are like, what? Hold the phone. I don't know why. Yes, there are
right.
some
You're
of
like,
us who are like,
just gave me another piece to my puzzle. Yes.
mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
And it goes on. I mean, it goes on and on. That we have, some of the people who teach on the foundation side, who train practitioners. They're like, you know what? The ether is real.
The ether is real.
The ether is real. And I'm like, are you undebunking the ether? They're like, yeah. I think
I didn't buy in, but now
the ether.
I couldn't buy in until I couldn't not.
Yes.
I love that. And I'm somebody who grew up agnostic. My mom was very spiritual, but in my rejection of her, it rejected that reality. And it was and for me, so much of my challenge with spirituality was the love and light narrative, because you were rejecting such a big part of everything if you were focusing on one frequency. And I'm sorry, you don't see me if you only can see love and light. And through my experiences and my challenges and the undeniability of what actually shifted when I started to realize it was all of that was true, and like it was, yes, this is part of it, but they still had only this much of the picture, and that I always had actually had more, but I didn't have anybody reflecting it, and so I just stayed away until I couldn't anymore. And so it's like, once that lens is opened, and once you start to see how everything is connected, literally, on a frequency level, on a, not just within us, but around us, we start to go, okay, like, so many of these things that are woo-woo concepts are actually real. We are water, but we also are electromagnetic fields, and we also hold all of these same components. We actually do attract based on our frequency. We actually do create constantly based on the frequency, as well as the lessons and all the other pieces. But now, if we can actually see it on a biological level, even more, because I'm thinking about, I have some really, really clairvoyant friends, for instance. Like, I have some really, really visually amazing, intuitive friends who are not just channeling in a sense, but they're even able to, like, I'm thinking of one friend in particular, and I actually know she listens to the show, so she's going to know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But she's able to connect to an energy field and build almost this really beautiful picture and kind of follow streams of data within somebody's field. And so I think she's really going to like this mitochondria one, actually. But thinking about that, it's almost like the quantum computer in her brain is already doing what now science is starting to keep up with in a different way. But it's almost like we could at some point look at, like, not through a microscope, but kind of the water in our bodies and start to see these maps form, which, then how do we shift it? And how does our, intention, as well as our frequency and light and all of these other things, build the entire story of our experience? And, it's just amazing to think about what does this field going to look like in 10 years, 5 years even? And what are we going to start to understand? I mean, we've already proven quantum entanglement is real. People, all of the spiritual people are like, well, yeah, we told you, but good job. Good job proving it. Right. And now we're getting to the point where we're starting to dig into these other pieces in a different way and really understand biologically and understand the impacts to the biologies. And, I've never been somebody who believed, anything was incurable or not, that we were victims of our circumstance ever in any situation. And so, but really empowering people to understand those nuances and even give them real solutions in a way that's not, that actually has, like, more options in a different way. Because I can tell people all day, connect within and feel it and trust it. But when their experience is all, and like society's experience has said, yeah, that's not how it works. It's a lot harder until they have that that undeniable wake up call. right? But as more and more of society starts to prove the realities in a different way, we're not gonna have as much unwinding to do either, because it's just going to be established knowledge in a new way. Which, I think about kids, and I think about my kids, and it's the things that come out of their mouth are very different because I'm their mom. But as more kids, right, that imaginative, creative space starts to be real in a different way, which is beautiful. Yeah, I love it. How
Absolutely. I know. And it's funny because, the field of quantum biology, the academic field, was pretty big deal when they said quantum effects happen inside living systems. And when I tell like the woo-woo people that, they were like, what are you talking about? They didn't know that. I'm like, no, not only did they not know that, they were actively, the scientific consensus was actively against that idea. Like they would have
time is only linear.
Not only do we not know that, we do know for sure that there are no quantum effects in warm, wet bodies. Not possible. Quantum effects only happen in these certain types of conditions. So it's just really funny because I can always tell who I'm talking to, because people are like, wait, what? Really? Quantum effects happen in biology? When did we figure that out? And then there are people who are like, there are people who didn't know that. That's so obvious. Like, yeah, that's true.
It's like we're in two worlds in a lot of ways, right? There's people who are just so linear. This is only until it's proven by whoever I'm deemed appropriate to prove it. And the people that are just like, yeah, of course the world doesn't, is more complex and works differently. Of course, all of these things are interconnected. Like it is two subsets of people.
Yes. And I often, feel like we are living in sort of parallel worlds. I heard someone describe it as like we're in parallel worlds and there's like a glass barrier. So we can like see over into that other world, and we can like participate as needed, but it's not our world. And I kind of made peace with the idea that I would just live in this parallel world with people who also wanted to be there, and we just, be like a quiet alternative. I have over the last 6 months come to think that glass partition might be shattering, and that the work that people like you are doing, that we're all doing over in our weird parallel, may in fact have a broader application than I ever would have thought possible in the old paradigm. So it's a very exciting time, because then when you even pull out farther and look at cosmic cycles of where we are, and it doesn't matter, like whatever cycle you look at, whether it's the Mayan calendar or Chinese cosmology or Western astrology or just economic cycles, historical cycles, like we're at the beginning, like all of that.
We're at the beginning.
We're at the beginning of something very unprecedented. So I'm like super excited to see what happens. I'm just, we're just going to keep doing what we were doing, but I don't know. I see possibility for more crossover than I would have ever thought possible.
Yeah, no, I received similar messages, not about, a lot of people are talking about splitting worlds and kind of like you're describing, like we can't see them, 3D versus 5D people, or that version of things. And the message that came through that actually surprised me when it came through is that the merging of worlds is what's happening, and that there have been separate, but that it's actually merging, and we're merging ideas, because if it's us versus them, we're still in repelling. We're still actually saying they're wrong and we're right, which is against everything we're actually saying is true. We are all interconnected to everything. And so by no longer repelling, and we can say their perspective is their perspective with their understanding and ours is ours, we're actually inviting a connection, because we're understanding that we're all just seeking truth at some point, right? And so as this merging continues, there's more and more opportunities for these connections, like fields of quantum biology being accepted by science. That's the merging happening in a sense, where we're making spirituality science-based. And of course, the magic seekers are like, it always was. But on the other side, it's this new exciting discovery. But again, this is where we're no longer repelling these ideas in a sense. And again, because of the entanglement, we're no longer repelling inside ourselves in order to do that, right? Because it's all micro to the macro in every dimension. And so to me, the work always, of course, is the ways that we were pointing fingers out, because it's another invitation back here. But as we start to do this, we see the reality in the earth, but also in the cosmos and the collective, no longer being separate from everything else, which is really healing that deep separation wound, like we were talking about, on all of these different dimensions. And so it's a really beautiful thing to think about as we kind of go through that. We're inviting not just turning back on parts of self, but turning back on parts of society and who knows what else out there, because we still don't know. We have ideas or possibilities, but to me, that the merging concept has been really right. Instead of living in duality, where it's this versus that, light versus dark, right, wrong, Democrat, Republican, whatever whatever the narrative is, we're all seeking actually the same thing. And by being able to kind of come together within self, we come together in all of self. And even the concept of past versus future coming together bridges this like quantum concept where everything is actually now and everything is available now. And what we created in the future might not be what we're creating in the now once we bring it together with all of the lessons, right? So we stopped rejecting these whole pieces. And so when I think about it from that perspective, this is, if anything, a validation of that actually happening, and that wall shattering as we're coming together. At least that's my
Yes. No, absolutely. And part of my journey too, like that that's coming to me to share, is that I definitely held back from moving forward with this because I'm like, I'm an English major and a coach. Like, who am I to talk about quantum biology, right? But what was told to me, and I did what I was told, was that you are the perfect person because we need bridges. We need bridges out of that world into other worlds. And we need people who can talk about it in a way that can be understood more broadly. Right. And I had to struggle through a lot of years of, my husband helped me in figuring this out so that I could be that person for exactly what you're saying, for that merging to happen.
Yeah.
And that the hard science part of it is what allows people in that strict Newtonian model to open to it.
Right.
And they wouldn't be able to otherwise. But it's like we're all called to participate in this merging in some capacity. And whatever your background is, it's going to be it's useful, and we need it.
Yes.
If you're listening to this, you're on the team. I don't know what to say.
You're on the team. Right. If you've made, especially 50 whatever minutes in, if you're still listening, you're one of us.
Yeah.
And
you made it to this point of the podcast, you qualify.
Period. And you may not know the details. You may not know what. And I think every single one of us, myself included, constantly struggle with, what does this mean? What am I supposed to do with this? How do I, the imposter syndrome creeps back up, and we push it aside. No, we're going to make a decision and we're going to keep moving forward. But we're called to the things we're called to for a reason, because we're called to them. There is a magnet pulling us from a gravitational force that is drawing us to understand, to connect, to do all of these pieces. And likely the experiences that we had, like your health issues and your exhaustion and all of this, was drawing you to this experience to understand, so that you could now share and talk and actually be connected in those ways, right? Had you not gone through that, you would have never run across any of this. And the same is true for my very challenging stories, and everything else has pulled me towards these understandings. And then it often surprises us if what unfolds, but that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Right? That's the and I have to tell you,
what am I doing?
The people who find me to be interviewed on this show, I do nothing from an advertisement. I literally am on one website, and the people who connect with me, I'm just these are the best conversations. And And I know now that this is the frequency that is being put out, that is responding to, because that's what I'm holding. And the more fun I have, the better the conversations get. So it gets even better. So anyway, this has been fantastic to hear about and to learn about. And, I'm curious where people can go to learn more. Especially, if somebody's like, oh crap, I really do need to actually address this. Like, where do they go to do that? And how do they either connect with you or with the foundation?
The best place is, so I have a website for the podcast, and it's QBCpod,
Okay.
QBCpod.com. And if you put your email in there, I'll send you a podcast guide, and it breaks down all the episodes. Like, here are the episodes we talk about light bulbs. Here are the episodes we talk about it. Like, it's a map, because it's, simple but broad topic, and it, takes time to implement. We also have a free community that's linked from that website as well, where you could go in and ask questions. And there's always like different health coaches and practitioners who've studied all this stuff in there, who are happy to answer questions and recommend products and all that kind of thing. So it's really worth diving into. And one thing I did want to say is, I fully acknowledge that watching TV and watching movies before bed is really nice and fun, and I totally do it. So the way to do that is to buy those orange lensed glasses called the blue blocker glasses, and just, if you're gonna watch TV before at night, to pop those on, because sometimes people hear this and they're like, my God, I have to give up Netflix. And I'm like, no.
That's my calm down time and my yeah. I mean, because we don't have candlelight conversations anymore. Like, we're just not in that era.
Yeah. No, that's not our world right now. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. So
I appreciate that.
Think in order to optimize their circadian rhythms, they could never watch TV after dinner.
No, you just have to do it differently. You have to do it differently, and you have to understand what you're doing when you're choosing to do it. Because if it's a conscious choice, it's very different than the unconscious one.
Exactly. It's good to know, and we do what we can.
Yeah. It's like sometimes we can still eat crap. We just know we're eating crap.
Yep, exactly. It's just we're choosing. Like, I am going to have a Snickers bar right now is what's going to happen. It's just how it's going to be today.
And that's okay, because you're not eating Snickers bars for dinner every day.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really fantastic conversation. I am honestly, I have so many more questions, but I will go dig in and listen. And it was really, really great connecting with you and having you on this show, Meredith.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm so glad I found you. Yeah. It's a little synchronicity. I love it
so much, so much. So for all of our listeners, I will put all of the information in the show notes for you to make it easy. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on Awakened Motherhood. I hope today's episode inspired you and offered support for your journey. Remember, your story has the power to ignite change, and your resilience is a testament to your strength as a mother. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with other mothers who might benefit from our stories of empowerment and healing. I invite you to connect with me on social media platforms at Amanda Quick Healing, or visit my website, amandaquickhealing.com, for more information on other ways to work with me. Until next time, keep embracing your divine self and discovering your warrior mama within. Thank you for being part of Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.